everybody. Thanks for coming out. Show of hands, who was here last year? Oh, I like that. Good. So, some of you may notice I toned it down just a little bit this year. We're just going with a little bit of flair. Last year, for those who weren't here or didn't catch the session, I had a full this pattern jacket on. I wore it again at our sales kickoff in January, and I vowed to never, ever wear it again. I did not do it for fun. I just did it because I want people to be excited about cloud. And this says something, actually, because I don't have to do that anymore, I find. People are already really excited about cloud, and that's great. I've been a cloud evangelist for a number of years now, found the power of it, and been really telling everyone to use it. And so I thought, well, I'll get this really obnoxious jacket to remind everyone that cloud's out there and that you should be using it. And this is about the level we're at right now. So next year, hopefully I'm not wearing a tie at all, and you'll know that we're all doing cloud and we're all happy with it and we're doing it properly. So we'll look for that as our metrics for success for the session here. All right, so this is Protecting Cloud with FireEye Helix and the Cloud Security Solutions. We're going to cover both Cloud and Helix because they're very interrelated. I am the Chief Technology Officer for Cloud for FireEye, otherwise known as Mr. Cloud, hence the ridiculousness. So thanks everyone for being here, and hopefully you'll stay for the whole thing, and you'll see and hear stories from our fireside chat. All right, so we're going to start talking about Helix a little bit. Okay, so these are all the different things that we do in FireEye when you boil them down to concepts, right? And there's no accident here that the very middle of all of this is Helix. So we see services. These are things like security program assessments, compromise assessments, incident response. You probably know about that from our Mandiant brand. We do managed defense, things like that. We have expertise on demand. We'll talk about that quite a bit. And the other sort of prong on the triangle we have intelligence. And so you guys probably know about iSight intel and all the other kinds of intel that we have. So having operatives in the dark web and all the really cool hacker stuff, we do all that. And these all play with each other, right? So Intel feeds services, services feed Intel, both feed our tech at the bottom, which is all of our different product lines and the things that we do there. And this is what makes us so special is that all those things come together. And at the very middle of that is really where the epicenter of all the things that we do, they come into Helix, right? And so we're going to really dive into that so you understand how that works and how that works in cloud. All right, so cloud itself is pretty challenging for a lot of different reasons. Along that, we have just the general problem with security. So we see alerts as being the number one problem, alert fatigue, right? And I think everyone has had that issue. Here's some basic stats, and whether they're exactly accurate, it doesn't really matter. I think the two to look at here are the number of security alerts daily. So 10,000 alerts, what organization could possibly look at 10,000 alerts? Obviously, you're thinking, well, we have to close a bunch without really looking at them, right? And the question is, how well are you doing that? What is the quality of that kind of, we'll call auto close, or how well are we closing those alerts automatically? Are we losing information when we do that? Who's looking at them? Some of these are no-brainers. You have a red alert, you go and you triage it, okay, fine. That may take you 20 minutes to triage a single alert. That's a long time. So we're going to show you how Helix can help with both of those things, because at the end of the day, we're trying to get that down to where it takes 0 minutes to do the easy stuff, so you can spend all of your SOC time doing the really hard stuff. So often we find that when we respond to a breach, there was evidence of the breach long before we got there, but nobody had time to look at these things. And that's really the goal in security, is to have time to look at those weak signals to figure out, okay, is this a precursor of an attack, something that a human is required for and that a machine can't do. That's really what your goal. So Helix itself is tech, process, and expertise, all three of those things. So first and foremost, it's a next-gen SIEM. We tried really hard over the years not to use that word because very few people say, I love my SIEM, it's my best friend. Most people hate their SIEM because it's work, right? You have to do a bunch of stuff with it, and it tells you what to do more. So it's kind of like your phone, right? It tells you where to go, what to do. It's very annoying. But it's still required, right? You still need a SIEM to make sense of things. You might need it for compliance, all those reasons. And Helix has done that for a long time, so we finally kind of were honest with ourselves and everybody and just say, okay, yeah, it does the SIEM stuff too, but that's not what excites us. We just kind of have to say it that way to explain it quickly. Hopefully, you'll understand the long-form version of that here at the end of the session. Because alongside the SIEM part, we do a lot of analytics. And this has been quite a journey. A number of us have done a number of talks across big data conferences and other places showing how we do a lot of these analytics. We're in what probably the 5th or 6th generation of our analytics. We've gone so far that we started with the anomaly stuff back when that was cool, or probably before it was cool, and then learned that that wasn't good enough, that you can't just say, I will take a random cut forest algorithm and apply it to this giant data lake. That is not going to get you good security results. We've learned to really hone those things to the things that matter, but still apply anomaly-based detection to that. So we've come a really long way because we've been doing this for a long time. Helix itself, if you look at the basis of it, is about 5 to 6 years old. And so that makes it actually quite venerable in what we're doing. And so whenever we talk about versions of Helix or something like that, you need to understand that this is lessons learned over a long period of time from a lot of different customers and a lot of data. I don't know if we've tried to count the amount of data that's gone through it ever, but we're in the exabytes at this point. I mean, it's a lot. Cloud visibility, we're getting into that quite a bit. On the process side, so we talked about the importance of automation. And one of those things, that 20 minutes to investigate an alert I showed before, the guided investigation, that's your easy button. So the same people who write the rules that go into this, we'll call it a SIM, that go in there, they wrote the investigation that goes with that rule. How many other SIMs do that? That's a big deal. So you get this alert, you click the easy button, and it says, here's all the other stuff that goes with it. You take one glance, and you're like, OK, close, no problem. Or, yep, escalate. And so we take care of all that dirty work for you. Along with that, we do the compliance reporting. Nobody really enjoys that, or maybe you do, and that's fine. I haven't met you, so if we can catch up after the session, you can tell me why you love compliance reporting so much. But it's certainly required, and there's certainly budget line items, and so we all have to be aware of that and deal with it, and we do a good job with that in Helix. And then lastly, sometimes you have alerts that show up and you don't know what to do with them, and we'll dive into that on Expertise on Demand. And of course, our intel that goes into it and the prioritization therein. All right, so what's new? What's happened just this year? So Expertise on Demand, we'll dive into that in a second. The self-service portal, I have a screenshot for you in a little bit. This is a really big deal. So much of the important things in Helix is how do you get data into it. We now have a self-service portal where in 2 minutes or less, you can get most cloud services integrated with it. If you were at the keynote yesterday, you saw a demo of that behind Grady as he was talking about our detection on demand as an example of one of the more advanced integrations that we do there. But simple things like CloudTrail, O365, all those things, very easy to do. You can do it all yourself. You don't need to talk to anybody. Anybody with access can do it. Or critically, if one person has access to Helix and another part of the organization has access to a cloud, there are ways to make sure that you can share that across so that it doesn't interrupt business flow. Federated Helix, that's the ability to have sort of an umbrella management capability. If you have a very large org, that's really important. Support for encrypted syslog. This means that if you have sources that have already encrypted a syslog, you need to get that to Helix. We now support that. We've added on even more intel context onto the intel that we do to make sure that every scrap of intel gets applied to anything coming through Helix. And lastly, we have technical integrations. These are above and beyond the cloud integrations. These may be making changes to an environment based on a playbook, things like that. All right, so Expertise on Demand, what is that? Why would you need that? So let's take a few examples. So let's say you see a suspicious domain and you want to know what we know about it. So you have a really, really good feeling that something is bad. You have no other things to go on. So you could say, hey, I need help. What is this domain? A real human on the other side of that chat box will fill that out, figure it out, and you'll get the best of breed response on exactly what that domain is. And that's pretty cool, especially if you're a smaller organization, doesn't have access to tier 3 SOC, those kinds of things. Similarly, if you see that the domain belongs to a particular malware family, okay, what does that mean? Is this targeted? Is it not? Are there any attribution for that? Let's say you find out that it is targeted. Okay, well now I'm pretty nervous, so we definitely need to look at the endpoint. Let's say that you don't find anything on the endpoint, but you know something's wrong. You're going to need some help, right? So you can use Expertise on Demand for that. And lastly, if you find out it's compromised for sure, then you might need to call Mandiant, right? And so that's a great lifeline to have. So it's kind of the 911 button right there, and without all the fanfare. All right, so this is a screenshot of the self-service portal. If you saw that in the keynote yesterday. That's actually changed. We have even more. We're adding to that regularly, almost on a daily basis. We have new integrations coming online. We've made a system that's really easy to update, and so generally if you put in a request, we can fulfill that pretty soon. But you'll see a lot of the basics there. And so on the top line there, there's an alphabetical order by providers. So you see a lot of Amazon, there's Microsoft, there's Google. We have managed security providers like Digital Guardian in there. We have some really cool ones like Okta and DuoAuth. You can imagine how important that would be in certain environments. We even have competitors in there, Proofpoint, Sophos, CrowdStrike. Basically, we don't care where you're getting the data. We know that we can do really good things with it, and we want to make it as easy as possible for you to provide that data to us. And so that's where we come in. Now, you also see FireEye detection on demand as a tile there, as well as Fire network security, and we're going to go into that in just a little bit. Those two things we're really excited about with the new launch. On the tech integration side, we have even more. So these go much deeper. These might take actions. These aren't just sort of read-only situations where you're pulling data in. They may also provide mechanisms for doing things like firewall rule writing or streaming data to Splunk, for instance, all those different kinds of things. And we have many, 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 many. If you go out on the FireEye.market, you'll see all of these listed, and it's really easy to point and click. For any of those that happen to be cloud integrations, they'll go directly through to the Helix portal for that. So take a look there, and if we don't have it, we have a forum out there that you can request. All right, so let's talk roadmap. Some big wins that we had already. So in Q3, it just ended. The portal that you just saw, we have password-protected email reports. For some places, you think, it doesn't matter at all, but this was a huge win for a number of places where they could not send email unencrypted, and so now finally they can make use of reports. So if that was you, congratulations, you can now do that. The encrypted syslog we talked about, and the federated console we talked about. And then we had an early win on the Q4 one there, the email metadata streaming. So our email product, our cloud email product, ETP, streams its metadata into Helix. You can use that to see all this stuff. So that was an early win from Q4. A big one that we're working on for Q4 is custom parsing. And what we mean by that is the ability for customers to do self-service to do their own parsing. This is a really big deal if you have a really trivial change that you need to make to your environment and you don't want to wait for us to do it. This allows you to do it very quickly. And then over time, that's going to become a really important tool for making a point and click to do pattern parsing. So we're going to be applying a lot of our machine learning capabilities that we've picked up over the years to things that we don't want humans to have to do. And machine learning won't take you the whole way, but it can definitely help out. And so look over the coming quarters to see that get even better. But the first foray into that's going to be next quarter. It's going to be really important. And I mentioned that we're in like our 6th generation of analytics. UABA is getting even cooler now with some asset tracking in the back end. And so this is becoming a really full-fledged UABA monitoring solution. We've done basically as much as anybody else before. We're doing even more than everybody else now. The back end is really cool. We have a number of different ways that we look at that data and that we incorporate that from multi-stage rules and other things like that. Looking out into 2020, we have granular RBAC. We already have rules-based permissions as it stands. It's going to get even better. We've heard loud and clear that that's necessary for some of our larger customers. And then one I'm really excited about, getting endpoint data streaming into Helix. I think that's going to be very powerful. And that doesn't necessarily have to be our endpoint. If you have something like Carbon Black, we can probably take that too. So that's on our plan for 2020. Improved logging visibility, so they kind of look like small things, but these really add up to being something that you can rely on to be that centerpiece of your SOC. And that's really our goal, is to be that for you. As we keep going out, we have Analytic Workbench. The way I look at that is a data lake on demand. So if you want to apply like a Jupyter notebook that maybe your data science folks are already used to apply that to the Helix data as it sits, I think that's going to be really powerful for some advanced use cases for some of our larger customers, or just some of our more curious customers, depending on who you are. And then some certifications there as well that are required. All right, on the cloud side, so there's 3 major challenges, and they're kind of in this order. So lack of visibility. I talk about this with customers all the time, especially as you're going into cloud, knowing what visibility you're going to have and you won't. And that changes a lot from on-prem. It also changes from the different cloud providers and the different SaaS applications. So I stress with everyone when you're looking at purchasing a SaaS application to figure out what the audit capabilities you'll have up front are to get that visibility. And then once you have that visibility and get into Helix, that's where you're going to need the ability to detect misconfigurations. And then lastly, getting that from all those different places, centrally located, is really the key. So let's say that you're getting interesting alerts from your cloud provider. If that doesn't get to your security operations center, what good was it, right? And let's say you're in 3 different clouds all at the same time, plus 4 different SaaS applications. Does your SOC get to see all of that? So if you have, we'll call it a password that's been hacked, and they're bypassing Duo Auth because they have a SIM chip that they've gone down to the mall and they paid somebody $100 to write them a new SIM chip to get bypass 2FA. How are you going to see that if it's across Duo Auth and 3 different cloud providers at the same time? You're going to need all that in one place to have that full story. All right, so our overall cloud security has morphed into a true cloud security solution where we're bringing all this together. So we talked about Helix extensively now. I'm also happy to announce we have a partnership with iBoss. So if you need what historically has been our network security in the cloud, and you don't want to run that on-prem, you want to be able to funnel that through somewhere, iBoss does a great job of taking that traffic, applying their basic stuff to that. So that might be the web nanny capabilities, and I'm sorry about the term, but being able to do content-based filtering there, but then also being able to hand off the interesting stuff to us to make sure you get the best-of-breed coverage for the sandbox side of it. We'll dive into network security on AWS and detection on demand in just a second. And then I don't want to forget about all the consulting services that we have. I talked about those already a little bit. But if you are wondering how the best way to go into cloud is, then you can contact us for security program assessments, things like that. IoT, you name it, we'll help you out there. And then, of course, our email cloud security solution. So that's from the cloud. Email security, go through a lot of different things. And there's other sessions for all of these things. So if you're curious about one of these, I'm not going to do them justice here. Please go check out the other sessions for those, especially on email security. And, well, not just especially, but a lot more to say there. On Veridin, this is one of the, I was so happy when we did this acquisition because I'd seen a demo of the Veridin product before we bought it, and I was like, oh, that's really cool, and now they're one of the families. This is great. Veridin is a way to make sure that all the things you think are true are true. So let's say you think your cloud security is good enough, you can put a Veridin agent on the inside, one on the outside, and test that theory. And this is really important for a lot of different reasons, not just to sleep better at night, but also if you're having trouble justifying the protection that you know you need and you need to prove it to your board, this is a great way to do that. And lastly, our threat intel applies to all the different cloud security. So we're looking at getting complete visibility, centralized monitoring. The cloud portal brings all that together. And we're bringing all that into the rules, analytics, and the dashboards I didn't talk about a lot, but these are a big win. In my mind, as someone who operated a SOC for a long time, the dashboards are not the thing you should be looking at all the time, but they're a great thing to check out when you first get in the morning because they prove everything's on and working, right? So that's very helpful. It's also great for execs to show, yep, we're doing our job, here you go. And they're good to kind of explore the data with, right? And you think, I want to see this query more often. Any dashboard can become a report that you can use over and over again. And so that's how you can really delve into your data. And as I said, having this across all your different cloud vendors is really critical. So in a given cloud, there's a lot of different ways that we can look at that data. These are the 4 specific ways, the categories. So we take audit logs, so who logged, who did what, who logged in, who did what, so did they create something, did they delete something, all those things. That's one of the nice things about cloud is you're guaranteed that the cloud provider will have a record of any major changes that have occurred. You don't get that on-prem, right? So if somebody creates an S3 bucket, there will be a CloudTrail record that says someone created an S3 bucket. You might not have all the visibility into some of the other things. You might have full packet capture or something else that you would have on-prem. You may not be able to do a memory snapshot, but you are guaranteed to at least have a chance to know that somebody created that bucket. So those go into audit logs. On the app logs, that's totally up to you, whatever you want to send in. I really recommend that dev environments spend time making sure that the logs that they're creating are understood by the security area so that the business logic can be understood for that UEBA. The network log is pretty self-explanatory, but this is often your only way to figure out who's been talking to whom. So being able to get things like VPC flow logs, Network Watcher, all that stuff into one place, not only is it going to hit our intel, right, just basic IP address checking, that's kind of a no-brainer, but then the context around an alert. So if you really think about an alert generated by something like GuardDuty, if you have the VPC flow logs around there, you're going to have a lot more context in Helix and with which to investigate that. Then lastly, of course, security logs, right? So these are sort of your red alerts. And then on top of that, sometimes they're more like green alerts because you're really not sure. And that goes back to that 20 minutes to investigate something, right? So you want to take those security logs and then weed out the ones that you need to look at. So all this goes through our analytics, IOCs, and of course our threat intel, and this is from all cloud providers. So I'm super, super proud to say that we are now officially on the AWS Marketplace. Round of applause for all the people that got that going. Internally, that was a really big step for this company to be able to do that. It really shows that we are committed to cloud security in general, that we are with you as you move into cloud. And that we are a first-order citizen in cloud. We've known about what bad guys do on cloud since the beginning, but this is really our first time to work with you as a consumer on how do we transact in cloud. And so really proud of this, that we've been able to come this far and a lot more good things coming. It's really just our first foray into it. And so 2 launches, hopefully you heard about them yesterday. One is our network security that you know and love, now available for AWS. This is really exciting because you can basically point and click on servers and say, I want to monitor all of the traffic to and from these servers, drop it into this device. And so you can get our network security looking at all those things. You can do this by tag, too. That's, I think, really interesting. So you could say, anything that's got this tag, I want to add to this Amazon VTAP, and that way I'll be able to monitor it. Detection on demand is one of my favorites. I think this is going to be a huge deal. We're just starting to scratch the surface of what you can do with this. So on the top of it, it's just an API, right? Okay, you can scan objects in the cloud. It's like, okay, well, we have our sandbox tech that you guys all know and love, and there's an API in front of it. Okay, with you so far, but what can you actually do with this? So you could start by saying, as you saw in the demo yesterday, every file that shows up in this S3 bucket, I want to know if it's good or bad. And if it's bad, I want you to put it in a quarantine bucket. So basic business process, right? That's an easy one. As we get further along, we'll do things for some of the other cloud providers, other cloud storage, all those things. As it sits today, anybody can go on, buy it, and then have that API key, and you can do whatever you want. We have a developer forum at FireEye.dev that will show you how to do that. We had some non-technical folks within FireEye be able to spin up an integration with Slack in about an hour with almost no technical experience. So there's really, the sky's the limit for this, no pun intended, to be able to take FireEye wherever you are going, right? So this is a way to apply our tech to your environment in ways that you couldn't before. And it's all on the marketplace. So with that, I would like your help in introducing and bringing up our panel here. So we have Stephen Alexander from AWS. We have Andy Smith from Sallie Mae. And Rich Baker from Optum. I feel like this starting lineup, right? All right. Well, thanks, guys, for being here. Some of you come from far away and some not as far away, but regardless, it's great to see you guys again, and thank you so much. So we'll start with some questions. Just to let you know, if you do have questions, we will be around at the end to ask us in person, probably at the back of the room there. All right, so first off, Stephen, can you tell us a little bit about what you see customers migrating to AWS and what you see their challenges are?
Sure. I mostly deal with enterprise scale, so larger customer sets, and it's really kind of across the different maturity models or where they are in that maturity model, what their challenges might be. But for a lot of folks who are new to cloud, it's this understanding that shared security model. You'll get that with all cloud providers, but it's a little bit different, right? When you're on-prem, that the shared security model is you own the whole thing, right?
Right.
But when you go to the cloud, some of that starts to be taken over by the provider. And for a lot of customers to understand where that demarcation line is sometimes confusing, or it's just something they have to learn more about.
You want to play a game?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to ask you if this is my problem or your problem.
Right.
All right. So first question. I have an operating system with vulnerability in it.
Right.
This is infrastructure as a service. My problem or your problem?
Yeah, so you spun up an EC2 instance and you're running Windows or Linux or whatever it is, and there's a vulnerability on that. And yeah, that's really on the customer side of the fence to, one, run scans on that, detect that there's vulnerabilities, and then two, fix it in however way they want.
Okay. How about if I'm running code in a container on Fargate? Now I have a vulnerable library in my container. Whose problem is that?
Yeah, well, you picked another one that was on the customer side, I think there.
That's right.
Yeah.
See a theme going here?
Right. Yeah, so in that case, but if you went back to sort of use the same use case as the first one, but with Fargate, in that case, since that's a managed service underneath, we would be taking care of the servers, the OS, and all that kind of stuff, and that's sort of abstracted to you. But yeah, the vulnerability or the code that you're writing, like, is it good code or bad code? That's not for AWS to decide.
Okay.
So yeah, that's on the customer side.
Okay. So a few months ago, there was a lot of talk about servers that were shipping from overseas pre-infected. Whose problem is that?
Oh, well, if they were coming to us, which I don't know about that, but that would be our problem with supply line and all that kind of stuff. But if it's going to a customer site on-prem, then that's something that you guys would have to take care of.
So at this point, I'll point out that to date, Mandiant Incident Response has never seen a major cloud service itself hacked. So when I ask him these things, I believe him when they say that we're securing this stuff. And that's part of why I'm wearing this tie and looking ridiculous, because I believe that we have that proof that the cloud providers have done what they said they're going to do and keeping servers operating safely in the cloud, and we've seen great evidence towards that.
Yeah, I mean, we get tons of audits, and there's tons of compliance reports out there. I don't know if the people in the crowd know about AWS Artifacts. So if you are having to abide by like HIPAA, PCI, DoD, SRG, IL2, 4, 5, that sort of stuff, or FedRAMP moderate, FedRAMP high, SOC, there's tons and tons of these that you can get the compliance reports with NDA. So once you go inside the console, you go to AWS Artifact, and you can get a lot of that information. So yeah, to your point, it's not just that we say we're doing it. We have third parties come in and audit us all the time.
Yeah, no, it's one thing, but I mean, if you're saying, well, truly, kind of like what I was talking about with Veridin, you're like, let's test that assumption. Mandiant Instant Response is the best way you're going to be testing that assumption. So that's why I'm so confident in that. So Andy, you guys have a pretty interesting cloud story. Can you tell us a little bit about what you guys have been up to with AWS?
Sure. So in late 2018, we migrated our full data center from our on-prem provider to AWS and Microsoft Azure, mostly in AWS. So what that means is we've moved a very voluminous server workload into AWS in combination with other serverless technology.
That's incredible. So how long did that take?
It took about 4 months.
4 months?
4 months of very long days.
It took longer than that for me to move an apartment. 4 months.
Yeah.
So it's a considerable number of servers, you're saying?
Yeah, it's not just the movement itself. That can be fairly easily with different technology tools. But we have to prove to our regulators, literally byte by byte, that we transferred a server with the same kilobytes of size from our on-prem provider to AWS. So it was a big deal because there was a lot of oversight. It was kind of like the election in Florida with the hanging chads, where everybody was watching to making sure that every little bit was accomplished. So it was a lot of oversight as we were moving those servers.
So not just servers, but regulated servers.
Regulated servers.
Because what do you guys do again? You're some kind of...
So we primarily focus in private student loans, but we're venturing out into other lines of business, such as helping students and parents plan for college, personal loans, and I think today we just launched our first student credit card.
Oh, wow. So financial, I'm going to go with.
Yeah, definitely.
That's incredible. All right. And so Rich, in the end here, so you have a pretty interesting perspective on this from Optum on just kind of cloud in general and Helix and what that's done for you. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges that you guys had?
Well, it depends. We do a lot of acquisitions. We probably acquire 25 companies a year. Last year we brought on 53,000 new employees, and I can see us on par again for that now this year. So that presents some very unique challenges. We have about 50 to 60 non-integrated entities operating at one time in our business unit, so monitoring all those is very tough. So, and also instrumenting that when they first come on board, it used to take about a year and a half to get them logging, to get everything set. Now with Helix, day one, we have Helix up and running. You guys provision it very quickly. Usually within 24 hours, we've had incidents where it's less than that significantly. And so now we have that. And the federated model that you spoke of earlier, that's actually, I believe, was created for us. So we actually use that one. And we're in the process right now of moving to that. So the integration teams have been great. There's quite a lot of back-end work from what I understand on that to move all that environment. So our SOC can see we have right now almost 40 Helix instances, and then the master Helix instance.
Wow.
And also now I think a commercial one as well.
Yeah, and they're not the only customer that asked for that. You happen to be the first using it, but we heard that loud and clear from a number of places. That's incredible. So just a quick kind of poll of the audience. Who has more than 100 servers running in cloud right now? You? All right. How about more than 1,000 servers running in cloud? Ooh, wow, that's definitely more than last year, so I am standing by my decision to go down to a tie from the jacket. I think we're certainly making some headway there for sure. All right, so it's October, and that means Halloween is coming up. So our next segment here, I want to ask about horror stories. Do you have any ghost stories for our we'll call it a campfire side, right? See what I did there?
Me first?
Yeah, so
Sure.
Stephen, tell me a horror story, and be as both nice and mean as possible.
Yeah. So with AWS, a lot of customers may be up and running and for months or a year or whatever the case may be, and they'll reach out to the account team and they'll say, hey, I heard about this thing called a well-architected review. I don't know if you've heard of them, but you can do them actually now on your own, sort of a self-test inside the console, but you can have a solutions architect like myself come out and we'll go through 5 different pillars. One of those is security. There's also fault tolerance and cost optimization and things like that. So doing some well-architected reviews, I've found some folks that you think that are pretty common, things like, hey, turn on CloudTrail, right? Not really on.
Oh, I like that. That is a good ghost story right there. CloudTrail not enabled.
The other one would be they have more than one account, and they're not consolidating those. So maybe they have it on, but they're not consolidating those CloudTrails into a single account. So that can be kind of an issue. In general, I look at it in 3 sort of main pillars. You have identity and access management. So how do you gain access to AWS? What are those rights and roles? What can you do? How is that managed and governed? So there's issues there. The other one is encryption. Encryption is silly easy to do inside of AWS, and it saddens me how few folks do it. It's just a click of a box, and there you go. And the last one, I think, is where you guys can really, well, I think also with the CloudTrail thing, you help out there a lot too. But the last one's on that network security. Just, hey, is flow logs even on? Do I understand what they do? Can I collect those? Or how about ELB logs? Or how about S3 access logs? Or how about all these other logs that you might be able to get? So the horror stories are really around, again, it's kind of like, hey, I moved stuff into AWS. I thought AWS took care of all of that. And you're like, well, no, there's a balance here.
The call's coming from inside the house.
Yeah.
At that point, yeah. Gotcha. How about you, Andy?
I've got a lot, so I think the
Pick one about a friend of yours. No, I'm joking.
All right. So I think during the process of incorporating the AWS logs into Helix, very early on we started with CloudTrail. We came in second was AWS Flow Logs, which there's a lot. And then there was the EC2 instance logs through the CloudWatch agent, and that can be either Windows or Linux. And then we hit the S3 access logs. So we want to know who's scanning our S3 buckets. It better be us and not anybody else because we don't have the publicly exposed S3 solution right now. It's not something that you want to do with current media attention. But what we learned is that when you set up a logging bucket, and you also send the access logs to that logging bucket to itself, you create what's called an infinite loop. And if you can imagine the impact that would have to your SIEM, it's pretty big.
Gotcha. Mine's going to be like that, but different. Well, I will do one.
Oh, it's me now.
Yeah, Rich, do you have anything super scary to talk about?
Well, mine are usually a little different because I run our digital forensics incident response practice for our mergers and acquisitions and commercial space. So usually when they engage us, there's something really wrong. So I'd say last year, this is kind of relate back to how the speed at which we deliver now, and it's thanks to Helix basically and HX controllers in the cloud. So we get a call as of July 3rd, and I get a call at 3:30 in the afternoon, and they said, yeah, I think we have somebody with hands on the keyboard here in one of our dev networks. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, say, oh, okay, where's this at? Oh, you're a 10-hour flight, great. Like, so I didn't want to bother any of my staff on a holiday, so I said I'll do this one and flew overnight and got down there and called our sales rep and said, hey, we need a Helix instance right now. We need a Cloud HX controller. We need all this put in place, and within hours we had it. We were able to identify the attacker, shut down all the services. Luckily, it was in a dev network off the main network, so no harm, no foul there. But the speed at which we were able to respond to that potential breach was amazing, actually. I mean, normally that would take, somewhere in the neighborhood of at least a few days to really get a handle on what you have going on there. But it reduced it to hours.
Wow. So would you call that scary fast?
Scary fast is exactly right.
I'm glad there were no tomatoes out there at lunch. I'd be in trouble.
I think they were going to get them.
Yeah, they're going to get them. Yeah, mine was kind of like Andy's with an infinite loop. So I love serverless. I'm a huge serverless evangelist. And I was getting really cute with some serverless stuff one day, and I had one Lambda call another Lambda Except that Lambda was itself, and there's this little button in the Lambda console for those of you who use it called throttle, and I needed that day. But the second part of that, and this doesn't apply just to Lambda stuff, this is kind of just a weird cloud ops thing in general. So you guys have all gotten that phone bill with the big surprise on it, and you're like, what? Who was calling whatever for this long? We had that happen with CloudWatch, because it turns out when you have something run away and it does a lot of CloudWatch logging, that can be a lot of CloudWatch logs. So those I've seen some startled looks when you're like, wait, that's how many logs? Oh, geez, yeah, that math is kind of crazy. So those were the horror stories. So what about the sort of the wins? I think we heard a few of them. What about some customer success stories you had where people maybe thought it was harder or something going in?
Yeah, I say one of the cooler things that happened with me was I had a customer running an application or service in AWS, and they called me. They were super excited just to tell me how they used AWS Config. I don't know if everyone knows about Config. But
go ahead. Why don't you tell them a little bit?
Yeah, so AWS Config is it's sort of like your configuration management database of the cloud. So what resources do I have? How do they relate to other resources? And a lot of people say, well, it sounds like CloudTrail, but CloudTrail is really the logging of events that happen. Config is really like a sort of different view of what services or resources you have and how they relate. And the other cool thing is it has a calendar view, so you can see what changes happen on which day.
Oh, okay.
And if you drill down on that, you can see even what the before and after of that configuration was. So in this particular case, what happened was somebody in their department made a security group rule change, and it broke their app. Like it stopped functioning because network packets couldn't move. And he went right into config and saw the change and saw the before and after, so he was able to revert the security group rules exactly to what they used to be, and everything was up and running. And that happened within I guess 20-ish minutes. Hey, there's a problem. What can I do? And he thought, Steven told me about config. Let's go check that out. So I thought that was a really cool success story using one of our native tools.
Yeah, that's amazing. It reminds me of a long time ago when I was building networks, and so they tell you when you're working on networking gear to always put a reload in 5. Any of you guys ever worked on like Cisco gear? So if you screw something up, the box will reboot and it'll revert. Yeah, I didn't do that once, and I was a kid at the time in college. I remember sitting in my apartment, I did it, and I'm like, I'll be right back. I had to run like 4 blocks down to campus and fix it. So that's one of the big advantages on cloud is you don't generally break the internet when you, for 20,000 people, when you mess up a router config most of the time, right? So
Yeah, generally. I don't think we've done that yet.
Yeah, I mean, hey, we can always set our goals high, right?
Right.
What about you, Andy? You got any big high fives from anybody lately? I imagine if you just migrated that many servers over in 4 months, you'd probably a little rotator cuff surgery going, right?
Yeah, kind of whiplash. I think the big win is the unified console. So we're getting logs from 60 plus AWS accounts, some Azure accounts, SaaS applications out in the cloud. We really need that win of being able to put everything into context in one place, and we do that with Helix. So we're logging probably over 2 billion events a day normally, which is a lot to keep in check. So we've taken that a step farther, and we've attached the managed defense offering through FireEye on top of Helix. So we take the Helix logs along with the endpoint logs from the FireEye endpoint into managed defense, and they essentially become our 24/7 operations center for security. So what that's really done for us is reduce the amount of alerts that we need to look at per day. So just out of context, our end-of-year report through managed defense, we had 35,000 alerts that fired. 5,000 of those were deemed significant enough for the FireEye managed defense team to look at, and out of that 5,000, we deemed that 300 were worthy to escalate back to us as the customer. So that's about 1 per day. So that would be the biggest win from like the Helix solution.
Gotcha. So Rich, on your side, I mean, I know that you guys do Helix for compliance in some cases and Helix for detection in some cases. Would you say you use it more for one or the other, or what kind of balance do you guys have with that?
It's more for detection. We use it more on security. Compliance, actually, we're using it very little for, actually.
Okay.
It is charged per EPS, so it can get a little expensive on that with a company of our size
Sure.
for compliance logging and all the different things we have to comply with because we own a bank, we own insurance companies, hospitals. It's a very diverse business we have, so we have it for mainly detection.
Gotcha. Is there what's the weirdest thing you've seen detected on there?
Well, I probably need to ask the guys that work for me what the weirdest thing they've seen is. We see a lot of, lots and lots and lots of, we deal with hospitals, so I don't want to say weird, it's just all kinds of new variants of ransomware we see detected. And I'll tell you, we see those in there, and we use HX as well. So those are actually shut down. So with anything with the agent actually hasn't had a ransomware because we get the alert and it's actually been shut down already. So that's actually been a huge win for us because we had such a huge problem with it, beforehand with new entities, especially hospitals. It's just shared machines that, the nurses like to surf the internet, so and pick up all kinds of ransomware. So
Gotcha. So I get asked all the time, where do you think cloud is going? And I'm kind of tired of answering that. So I'm curious to ask where you guys think cloud is going right now. So feel free to just take your wildest guesses. But Steve, we'll start with you. What do you think is going to happen? And we'll say the next 24 months, what's it going to look like?
24 months. Well, so you did a poll here, like how many people are running 100 servers, how many people are running 1,000 servers, and so on. I think there's going to be more and more of a push towards serverless compute, right? So you're looking at Lambda or perhaps containers as they move there, but I really think Lambda functions are going to be taken off. I see that a lot already.
All right, quick poll. Who's using containers and or Lambda serverless?
So that will rise over the 2 years. We'll see more of that. And I think when you think about from a security perspective too, right? What's more dangerous or a larger risk, running a server or just running some code in a function that comes and goes, right? So I think even from a security perspective, you'll see a greater adoption towards that because it really does reduce your risk profile.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I think cloud is so secure. So a couple years back at RSA, did a workshop on serverless security. And it was kind of a purple team where the first half was a red team and you'd hack into a serverless function, and then the second half was doing the blue team investigation on that. And it was really fun putting it together because it was really, really hard to find a way to hack into a serverless app. Because when you're doing serverless, let's say you're using Dynamo for your backend, you can't do any SQL injection, you can't do so many of the normal web vulnerabilities that are there in a traditional app, just totally gone. And so it really comes down to sort of permissions trickery, parameter invalidation, things like that. And it was funny because as I was putting it together, I reached out to some of your security group, and they're basically like, yeah, let us know what you find. And a couple of the parameter things were like, oh yeah, that is kind of interesting. But the point back to the cloud being more secure, none of these were the cloud provider's fault. These were all very easy ways that you can misconfigure something for it to happen. And that was this is almost 2 years ago. So even back then, it was very evident that if you are a CISO and you want to get the most secure code possible, the most chances of something going wrong, being removed, are your best chance there. And so saying only this little bit of code is the only thing that could possibly go wrong sets you up for success, really. Awesome. What about you, Andy?
So I think it's definitely going to shift towards serverless. The risk of having an EC2 is greater because of the shared responsibility model. So we want to defer that risk to AWS and then just focus on the code inside the Lambda. I think the next phase will be infrastructure as code. So we've already started to give each development team their own test, dev, and prod accounts, and that will allow them to test new services, deploy them using our infrastructure as code software into the test account and then to production eventually. So I think that's really the future. It's more of if something happens, you can just redeploy the whole environment in a matter of minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of look at account IDs for Amazon-specific terminology being sort of the new firewall and using as many different accounts to segregate out that as possible. Tenant ID would be on the Microsoft side. And then Google actually does something kind of helpful. They do projects by default, and so it just sounds a little bit more understandable that, oh yeah, I have a new project, so go here. But within a project, still having dev, test, and prod on a per project basis, I think is critical.
Yeah, and to illustrate, we've been leveraging the new deployment portal, and that's part of our setup for a new AWS account. So that all happens on the back end in a matter of minutes, and that account is going to permanently be sending logs to Helix.
Yeah, you guys are my hero. I mean, that's where I tell every customer to be at. How about you, Rich? Where do you think it's going?
Well, I'd have to agree with both of them on this. We're actually starting to require our vendors now to show us that they're on a roadmap for that or offering those things. So
Wow.
serverless is definitely something. Containerization is big for us. I've been pressing them every time I talk to anyone. You're going to have that, or we're just not going to do business any longer. It's where everything's going. Also, the identity and access management from the cloud providers is actually making things a bit easier as well. They don't have to maintain all these different Active Directories and IAM solutions out there. So I see that growing significantly in the coming years.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I think we're just about up for our time. So can you guys all give me a warm round of applause for our guests for coming so far?